Alright everybody, welcome back to Chumming with the Spirits. Parachum here, we got JD and OG. As usual, we're going to start off with a shot of something on our table that we forgot we had. Tonight's Screwball peanut butter whiskey. So grab your drink and cheers. That's way better than the Fireballs last time. I'm not gonna lie. I think we drank way too many of those, by the way. So tonight we kind of wanted to do something a little different and interesting. We have a special guest, Mike Nichols, online via conference call with us tonight to kind of discuss a theory that he's had in the paranormal that he's actually been able to work on and devise. And we're going to kind of go into have him talk about kind of what he's done in regards with that, and an experience that on an investigation that I had while he was performing one of these experiments that I found kind of interesting and frightening. Well, yeah, I mean, it happened to me, so it was terrifying shit to me.
Right.
But the correlation I always thought was very, very interesting between the data he got and the data that I saw.
I'm really excited about this. I know nothing about this.
Yeah,
I'm going to learn something. This is just going to be really eye-opening for me. So I'm excited.
Awesome.
Let's get the guest in.
So welcome, Mike. If you want to go ahead and kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about this this theory. I guess it might not even be a theory anymore.
Okay, I'll do my best. I want to tell you that I knew about your tradition of starting off with a shot of something, but I didn't know what it was going to be tonight. So I tried chocolate vodka, and it works. It works for me.
Yeah, that's good. I love chocolate vodka.
Okay, well, my name is Mike Nichols, and I live in Kansas City, Missouri, where I have lived most of my life, and I've always been interested in paranormal stuff ever since I was a kid. And during the 1980s, I taught a class in academic parapsychology at UMKC, University of Missouri at Kansas City. And one of the things I always wanted to do was work with a random number generator in the investigation of haunted houses. Now, I've got to back up and tell you what inspired this. There was, I don't know if have you guys ever heard of the Global Consciousness Project?
Oh yeah, I have. I don't know if these two have.
No.
Okay. Well, let me sum it up real quickly, as quickly as I can. This was an experiment that was done, an ongoing experiment that was done by the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research, or PARE Laboratories, under the direction of Roger Nelson. And he wanted to see if he placed random number generators around the world, if they would, well, I suppose I should go back and tell you what a random number generator is. It does just what its name says. It just sits there cranking out a data stream of nothing but random numbers. And there are mathematical tests that can then be applied to the data stream to see if the stream really truly is random numbers, or if it's gone off the beam, if it's starting to generate patterns and so forth. So that is the anomaly they were looking for, and they wanted to see if that would happen whenever something really big happened on the world stage. When suddenly, they called it the human consciousness, or the World Consciousness Project, because they wanted to see if everybody was suddenly focused on one particular thing. Their consciousness was all converging on one particular thing. Would that cause the random number generators to start going off the beam and start generating more coherent data streams? In other words, the world consciousness was more coherent. Would that cause the random number generators to be more coherent? And they had some early successes with things like the O.J. Simpson trial. When they read the verdict, everybody around the world was watching that, and sure enough, all over the world, the random number generators which were usually located in university locations, would suddenly start generating patterns. And it happened again during Princess Diana's funeral, and their parade example of it was the 9/11 terrorist attack. Suddenly the whole world was watching what was happening here in the United States, and random number generators all over the world, they had their biggest spike. It's really interesting if you go out and look at the data, look at the charts, because they're clearly off the charts at this point. And suddenly the random generators were not generating a random data stream at all. They were suddenly coherent. And what's really interesting about that particular occasion was that you see the spike starting to occur. If you look at the graph starts to suddenly go up about 2 hours before the first plane hit the first building.
Interesting.
Yeah, let that sink in for a minute.
That almost makes me think of like a human consciousness premonition.
Exactly. And it could be several things. It could be, okay, well, the plot for that was already in the works. So was it somehow picking up on that? People were already in the air and planes and so forth. But maybe it was like people around the world already had premonitions of something bad going down. Wow. But these premonitions were still at the subconscious level, but it was still strong enough to affect the random number generator. Who knows?
That's very interesting.
A lot of different theories. And of course, there's that old thing in science that just because there's correlation, you can't say there's causation.
Yep.
All we can say, excuse me, my voice is a little rough tonight. All we can say for sure is that there was an extremely large correlation spike between the random number generators and that event. And I don't think it's been duplicated since then, although there have been many smaller events since then. So that was my inspiration. And I thought, what would happen if I kind of downscaled this idea and took a random number generator into a supposedly haunted house? And would if there were anomalous events that happened in the haunted house, I'm talking about your typical, sightings of shadow figures or movements of objects or cold spots or whatever, would those events correspond in time to anomalous spikes in my random number generator? And lo and behold, they did. So yeah, I should back up and say I worked with a group from Illinois called the Paranormal Research Institute, PRI.
Yep.
Led by Dan Williams. You know them, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And Scott Hibbs and Brandy Bryan. Shout out to if they happen to be listening. I went to a Paracon here in Kansas City, and just almost by chance, or maybe not. I don't know what's chance anymore. And I met these guys, and what I discovered was that their approach to their investigations was highly scientific. And one of the things that Dan had them doing was logging every anomalous event they experienced onto a minute-by-minute spreadsheet, basically. Yep. So they knew every time an anomalous event happened and was called in on walkie-talkie by one of their investigators. And I thought, geez, that's the piece I need to work with my random number generator, right? Because what we were looking to find out is if there was correlation between the reported anomalous events they were having and the anomalous events coming from my random number generator. And the first investigation we did, I think the first formal investigation we did, was at the, I'm going to have to say, trying to remember now. The Garnett was the second one we did. I'm going to have to look that up. Hang on a minute while I consult my charts.
Yeah, shout out dates to them. So we're my main friend in the paranormal field, Jason Kupsik. They contacted us, and it was either last weekend or the weekend before that they were in town and wanted to meet up and hang out. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to because I had prior obligations, but we try to get with them and hang out before their investigations every time they're in town. Great group, great people. Can't find anybody better suited for scientific paranormal investigation, and they're great people regardless. So I just wanted to say that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I found out what I was looking for. Our first attempt at doing this was the Beatty Mansion.
Oh yeah. Up in St.
And in St. Joseph, Missouri, and we got our biggest effect during that investigation. What we did was, and this was kind of funny because we had during that night, and of course a typical investigation for us was about 7 hours long. And during that 7 hours, we had 12 anomalous events on the random number generator. It's sometimes called a random event generator, or REG, instead of an RNG. And it turns out that 12 of the RNG events occurred within 3 minutes of one or more paranormal events reported by the various members of the investigation teams.
Yeah, that's
very. We were working with multiple investigation teams for that night. In fact, each time we've done this, we've worked with different investigators. So that's interesting, and yet it still works. And so what we had to do was to run that. I asked a friend of mine, David Schumacher, and shout out hi to Dave if he's online. He's brilliant with working with statistics, and I just basically sent him our spreadsheets of every time the random number generator had an anomalous event, and every time an anomalous event was recorded, to see if the correlations between the two were what would be, above chance expectations. And in other words, we were looking for statistical significance. Now, statistical significance, here's where I lose your whole audience and your ratings go down, okay? But statistical significance in one of these investigations, usually in scientific experiments, it's at a probability level of what we call P equals 0.05. Now, in gambler's terms, that means this would happen by chance only one time out of 20.
Yeah.
And that's considered statistically significant in most areas of science. For example, if they're doing pharmaceutical tests and they're looking for statistical significance between the group that is taking the actual drug and the group that is taking the placebo, they're looking for that difference where the people taking the actual drug are being cured at a level that would happen by chance only 1 in 20. If they meet that level, then they know that the drug is having an effect, or that's the conclusion, and then it goes on for further testing for like side effects and so forth. But essentially, it's ready to be released to the market.
So I hope you don't mind me interjecting for a second.
Please do. I'll just keep chattering if you don't.
So I wanted to kind of get it in perceptions for people that may not understand that. So what I'm taking from that is when you look at a typical probability bell curve, where most
called the normal distribution curve,
yes.
And it is a bell curve, yes.
So when you're talking about that, the center is the most probable, where the balls or whatever are going to land, or the data points are going to land.
Right.
You're talking about those outer limits closer to the baseline.
Exactly right. if you can envision that bell curve, we were, well, to tell you how far out we were on that bell curve, like I said, I would have been happy if we had reached the level of 0.05, which is the 1 in 20. That would have been statistically significant, and that would have been a success for us. But I turned over all of our data to Dave Schumacher, who, like I said, is brilliant with statistics and also has done some of this work. And he analyzed it. And I should back up and say that typically, the way people, I was not the first person to use a random number generator in a haunted house. That had been done before. But the way, the experimental protocol had been to take a random number generator into a haunted house, so-called haunted house, leave it and let it run all night, and then retrieve it the next morning and look at the cumulative deviation from the mean. How far did it wander, in other words, from what would be expected by chance? And then compare that to taking a random number generator into a house that was not haunted, or not allegedly not haunted, there's nothing reported, and letting that run all night, and then picking that up the next morning and comparing the cumulative scores. And there had been some work done in that arena, but it had never reached the level of statistical significance. So the difference in my approach was I went back to the old psychical research approach of like flipping 100 coins to see how far out it would be, probability would suggest that you would get, 50 heads or 50 tails, or maybe even 55 heads or 55 tails. That wouldn't be too much out of the norm. There's chance deviation. So, but if you're getting like 61 or 65 heads in a run of 100 flipped coins, that would be unusual and extreme, because it's well, what do you call it? A function that doesn't. It's an exponential function, basically. That each time you get another coin flip that comes up heads, that's even more unusual in terms of odds than the one before it.
Yeah, because nature.
I'm explaining this very well, but
Well,
anyway.
yeah, because nature dictates that when you have a 50% probability of it being A or B or heads or tails,
Right.
that it's going to be alternating, and that number should be over a certain given number of flips equal to the number of the other variable.
Right. You should either expect, somewhere
What?
around 50 heads and
Yeah.
50 tails for each 100 flips you did.
What would you say?
Once you get over that 55 point, now you're looking at there is something influencing the outcome, either weighted coin, influences when it's flipped, that sort of thing. That's why you're saying that's a significant thing. This is now no longer
Chance.
It's now no
yeah.
longer random.
Yep.
So yeah, you're right. So that's what we used, and my program, my random number generator, the program that I wrote for it, would generate 100 numbers real quickly, and then immediately take it back to the baseline and start all over again with another 100 flips, and do that over and over again for 7 hours.
Yeah.
And that way, if it hit a threshold of being really anomalous, we had this program running on my smartphone, which is essentially a handheld computer these days. And this is not one of those ghost apps. I want to clear that up right now. It's a program that I wrote myself. It's a custom program.
I'm sure we'd endorse that.
It relies on background radiation noise as the source of its randomness, because I don't know if you've ever written a computer program, but you can do what's called pseudo-random numbers.
Yeah.
But to do that, you call a random function within the operating system, but you have to seed that, and anytime you seed the random number generator function with the same number, it will spit out the same sequence of numbers. So it's predetermined. So it's not truly random. So we do not, that's not good enough for our research. We can't use pseudo-random numbers or PRNG. We have to use true random numbers or TRNG. And that can be produced in a number of ways. It can be, a sound diode, for example, or it can be external hardware. It can be, the earliest ones were based on the decay of strontium-90, which is one of the most truly random processes we know in the universe. Mine is basically, the phone picks up the background radiation levels and turns that into a data stream. And there's really no way of hoaxing that or changing that. I mean, no other outside environmental factor will change that. So we just monitor it and then see when it goes off the beam. And now getting back to what I started to say earlier, I would have been happy with a p-value of 0.05. Obviously, the smaller the p-value, the more anomalous it is. And in a chi-square evaluation, you're evaluating two variables. You're looking at when did the RNG hit effect become anomalous, and when did somebody call in what they felt was a paranormal experience. And you compare those two and see if they correlate. So when Dave Schumacher got back to me with the chi-square evaluation, blew me away, because, like I said, the lower the number, the more statistically significant. We got a p-value at the Beatty Mansion of 0.00001.
Holy shit.
Holy shit is right.
Oh, wow.
In gamblers' terms, that means that the correlation between the two variables that we got that night would have happened by chance only 1 in 10,000, 100,000 times.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it's, I mean, Dave told me that when he first heard about my crazy idea, he's done a lot of work in parapsychology and random number generation, and he thought, nah, that this is not going to come to anything. And as he analyzed the data, his reaction too was, holy crap, this can't be. But not only did it happen, we've done 2 more experiments. So we've replicated this essential experiment using different investigation teams 3 separate times. And we've got statistical significance in all 3 of those times.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because that brings up what I kind of wanted to ask you about, the experience that I had at the Garnett House while you were doing your true random number generation experiment, and get your thoughts on the correlation between them. Because the experience that I had was, to this day, very profound. It shook me, because I'd never experienced anything like that before.
Oh, it changes you when you're on the scene. You're actually present when this starts to play out.
Yeah, because I mean, I've done that kind of experiment because Jason likes to torture me multiple times, but I don't know if the causation of me having that experience, and it's the only time I've ever had that experience, happened because of the random number generator experiment going on. It kind of reminded me of that. I can't remember the theory where you film something, you won't catch it because it knows you're filming it, but you turn the slit theory, I think is what it's called, or something like that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
the double slit theory.
The double slit theory. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what were you guys saying?
I said, well, why don't you set the stage for us and tell us what happened? We don't know the story. This is
Okay.
if you guys don't mind.
Well, yeah, go
How
ahead.
about we take a 5-minute break, We're about,
Well,
I think,
the thing is, there are a lot of different theories that could account for it, and right now we don't have a definitive explanation of what could account for that correlation. We just know that there is a correlation. Now, going back to what you experienced that night at the Garnett house, and you're talking about that loud noise in the dining room?
No, this was when I was. So we'll take a 5-minute break if you don't mind to let these guys use the restroom, and then when I get back in. But no, it happened when I was doing the mirror experiment up in the little closet in the upstairs where I was.
Yeah, okay.
So I'll get into that here in just a second, folks. We'll be right back after wee break,
And we'll get a stage set, and we'll get to hear the story. What happened?
Yeah.
This is gonna be great.
yeah.
because it was a fast 35 minutes.
That's crazy.
So we'll be right back, folks. So welcome back, everybody. Sorry we had to relieve some stuff and fill our shot glasses up. This is the first time that we've ever done a shot within 2 shots within an episode coming up.
Yeah, you're right.
So I don't know what they're drinking. I'm drinking Crown Apple.
Well, that would be crapple. That would be
And
crapple.
somebody's finishing off the screwball.
I am finishing off the screwball because I like peanut butter. So there we go.
Ziggy zaggy, hoy hoy hoy.
Cheers.
And I had more of my chocolate vodka.
Nice.
I want to try that next.
I'll bring some next time. It's really good. Chocolate wine's good too, by the way. Chocolate wine. So,
I'm a huge fan of meat.
Yeah. We all are.
Yeah.
We're gonna have if you ever want to, we'd love to have you come and sit with us and do this with us live. I mean, it would be fantastic.
Or possibly investigation if you're
totally
ever
open to that, especially if there's meat.
Yeah. We will make special arrangements for meat on that one.
We'll get you what you want. We promise.
We will even get you a dwarf with an axe to serve it to us.
My wife is 5'2". She's not really a dwarf.
That was mean.
You're the one that said it, right? But we're doing this in Raymore, so we're not too far far away from you. You're in Kansas City.
Thought we were in Belleville.
No, this is Raymore.
Oh.
Big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, real big difference. Wow.
All right. So we wanted to kind of get in to start off with the experience that I had at the Garnett House, and we were briefly mentioning over the break that this investigation was kind of unscientific in terms of like I didn't know while doing the experiment that I needed to call in and log in, so it made the data set a little harder to interpret. But Jason had me. So if anybody's not familiar with the Garnett House, it's in Garnett, Kansas, hence the name Garnett House.
Okay.
Duh.
No, I don't know nothing
You
about
don't
it.
know
This is
where
great.
Garnett, Kansas is.
Take me to. Yeah,
So-
hey.
One of the most active areas in the house, from what I've been told and experienced, is there's a little attic, like closet area on the second floor that has access to the attic. And Jason wanted me to sit up there in a chair by myself, staring at a mirror with a candle lit, so it kind of strobed a little bit, and stare into the mirror. And I've done this on multiple occasions at other locations, and nothing's really happened besides me being scared crapless, being
Weirded
by
out by it.
myself. Yeah, that's a given. But I remember I was staring into the mirror, and I was looking at my reflection, and all of a sudden, something conspired and took place where the image that I was seeing in the mirror of myself turned into the negative version. So when I say negative version, if for the old schoolers out there, when we used to use like 35mm camera and you used to have to go get it developed and all that stuff, they would give you negative copies where
So
everything's
you're talking about not morally negative, but a photo negative.
like the inverted vision.
Right.
That's what I was seeing of myself in the mirror. And then all of a sudden, the mirror started to split and crack from the center and spread out like a wave. And the cracks started to separate, and I could see through the cracks. Like, it was just like an infinity in between the cracks. And I kind of like freaked out and like shook my head and like hit myself and was like, what the hell? And everything was back to normal.
Right.
It was very, very interesting. It was almost like I experienced seeing into a portal. I don't know much about portals and mirrors and all that stuff. I know people say that they're bad and you shouldn't mess with mirrors. That didn't occur to me at the moment.
But
it
I
was,
mean, there's studies on people staring into a mirror and having
Their face,
their
it's
images
distorted.
start distorting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not
so-
as much as what you're saying, because you saw
Yeah.
a negative
Yeah, and
and then start seeing a loop.
yeah, there is an effect that if you stare into a mirror with the correct low light atmosphere and stare at it long enough, your face will start to distort
Right.
and all that kind of stuff.
Well, not only that, but people use mirrors for years for what's called in folk traditions called scrying,
Yeah,
which is where they're trying to do a divination of some sort, trying to find something out about somebody they're trying to look in on, and they use what many times what's called a black mirror, which is like a piece of glass painted black from the reverse side so that it's reflective. And there's a long history of people using black mirrors and scrying. But any reflective surface or candle flames or anything else can be used for scrying.
where you
And
gonna
you
say?
could be sitting in your local bar and having a tall cold one and say that you're scrying in your beer.
so kind of like the old,
That was good. I like that.
the old witches looking into cauldron and stuff like that, and you're trying to find someone. You see the reflection in the liquid in the cauldron. So
Well, remember
to that effect.
I think
Yes.
it was. Remember the tale of was it Snow White?
Yes, no way.
Mirror, mirror on the
mirror
wall.
on the
On the
wall.
wall.
Yes.
Yeah.
That type of thing. And in the Salem witch trials, they're guilty of doing it with water
Yep.
to determine their future husbands and all that kind of stuff.
So after
Pools of
you
water, pools of ink, all of that.
Yeah.
So after you saw what you said, and obviously you freaked out, and I know how your mind goes sometimes.
Crystal balls. You got to mention crystal balls.
Yeah,
Oh, shit,
yeah, absolutely.
I didn't even think about
No,
that.
that dead on. I mean, that's it right there.
Yeah.
So what happened when that happened?
So I pooped myself.
Okay. Oh, that's not good. There's an anomaly in itself.
So I am
Really
so
anomaly.
scared of being by myself because I pick up. I don't know what it is. I don't know if you guys think stuff's attached to me because I see
No, I
shadows
think
we
you're a
know
magnet.
this.
and like doors closing in my apartment for
Yeah,
no obvious
yeah.
reason in front of me on camera. But I get this feeling that when I'm somewhere in the dark, like even if it's not haunted, I don't like being by myself because I feel like other things are there to mess with me.
Is that when do you feel somebody else there? Do you get like a feeling that
Or
somebody...
watching or
Okay.
something like ready because they know that I'm
Do
scared.
you think you manifest that with your fear?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
Okay. What do you think, Mike?
No, we didn't have. You didn't have any way to report that back to.
No, the only thing I
Wow.
did was scream for Jason, come get me, and he came up there.
Yeah, that's a shame because I would have really liked to know if one of my anomalous moments on the RNG that night would have corresponded. But as we were talking among ourselves while during the break, we just did not follow protocol that night, which is a shame because I'm sure that we might have gotten something really great if everybody had realized they needed to report everything that happened to them, and it's hard to do when you're in the moment. I know that, but it's an absolute requirement that you have to report by the minute what happens to you, and it can be anything that you deem is anomalous. I don't care if it's just the hair rising on your arms or whatever. If you think it's important enough to call into the base camp and report, then it's logged, and we compare it to the RNG output.
That's
And
fantastic.
that's how we figure out if there's a correlation.
So when they log it, do you also want to know the experience that they're logging at the time, or does that not really matter as much?
We always put that down, of course, as part of the log entry, and we do this on paper as well as the RNG, of course, makes an internal log of everything that happens to it automatically. So we can, that's one way we know we can't cheat or change it, because there's an internal log that's written directly to a file inside the phone. And you can pull that out and look at it later, and it's all timestamped. But Brandy always insists on using paper and pen as well. So anytime I have an RNG event, I tell her what I just had an RNG event, and she checks the time servers and writes it down, because God knows when you're dealing with technology in a haunted house, a lot of times it goes belly up, and you're really good to have made a paper copy of that, so you'll have that to fall back on.
Yeah, and just want to throw that out there, people. When Skynet goes active, all this data that we have in the cloud and on our computers isn't going to mean shit unless it's written down on paper. Just saying.
Right.
But
right.
no, but how many times we personally have experienced that type of battery drains, software quits working, you get some weird, but it's hard to mess up a pen and paper,
Oh, that's right.
I mean, you're absolutely right. That is a great backup.
These are great lessons right here.
Yeah, so,
and to get back to your question, from my point of view as a parapsychologist, I hardly feel that, yes, of course it matters to me what the person's experience is, but I'm just there to find out if that experience correlates to the RNG output. That is the experiment that I'm running, if you get me.
I get you.
I don't care if it's like, you just saw your dead grandmother, or you just saw a portal open and all the demons of hell are, there.
Yeah.
I just want to know what time it happened.
I totally get you. I did have a quick question, and this is coming from my brain, which is kind of messed up that these guys know it.
We'll try to interpret.
They'll try to interpret. I overthink things a lot. So in regards to the random number generator that you've developed using the baseline atmospheric radiation, how does it generate the numbers, and not necessarily how does it generate? Does it create more than just ones and zeros? Does it create like numbers from 1 to 100 or 1 to 1,000?
Well, actually, I've got it rigged so it comes in binary. Of course, it's just ones and zeros initially, and that's because it's looking at background atmospheric what we call atmospheric noise, and that is literally the white noise of the universe that was left over from the Big Bang. It's like if you're listening to your FM radio and you dial between stations and you hear that white noise kind of that? Yeah. That's what is being turned into ones and zeros in the white noise generator.
Because sorry, Jeremy, I just wanted to get this out real quick before I forget about it. So what I was getting at with that was, if a certain anomalous event is logged and recorded, if there's correlations to pattern types repeating for that type of anomalous event. So say like when you guys were at the Beatty Mansion and you guys had 12 anomalous random number generations logged that he was able to analyze, if the patterns were the same for certain types of paranormal occurrences that happen, so say someone called in and logged, hey, I just saw a shadow walk down the hallway or something like that, or I heard a noise, would the anomalous random number generator pattern for noises be different than shadows and be the same for all audio? Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think that is a great question, but we haven't gotten there yet. It's something we need to follow up on. It's a possible future, experiment that we can run and look at, but it requires looking at a tremendous amount of data because those ones and zeros are being generated, a million times a second or whatever. So, great question, but we're going to have to figure out a way to actually do that kind of analysis. I'm not a mathematician by profession, so I don't know how to approach it. But with the right people on board, we might be able to do that in the future.
And I just want to clarify, you said rig. You meant configure, you configured your number generator to interpret the ones and zeros. A lot of people, I don't want people to get misconstrued that
Right.
you were setting it up to do something predetermined. You're just interpreting and configuring it to be able to take the binary into either decimal or...
This binary, we actually collapse that into a, what you do on a computer or on certain computers at least, or on a smartphone, you can actually what they call peek into a memory location that will give you a 1 or a 0. And that's what is recorded as the machine runs, as the RNG program is running. It's a data stream of ones and zeros, all of which are retrieved from a memory location in the computer, which basically is hooked up to the RF chip, the RF chipset that is in any modern smartphone. Because as you know, smartphones can do things like pick up RF or radio frequency, but it can't do that without an antenna. So if you want to listen to an FM broadcast on your smartphone, you have to have your a wired pair of earphones plugged in, which then acts as an antenna. Without an antenna, you're just going to get the random noise that's generated in your particular locale, which in this case is within the haunted house, or allegedly haunted house.
I'd be interested to see if, sorry, I to interrupt, I'd be interested to see if this was performed scientifically during a paranormal investigation during something like a solar flare.
I would like to, and we do log a lot of other data besides just the RNG hits. We log everything from the moon phase to the time of the night it is to, in fact, we've got a running gag on that one, because when I first, I was working independently basically when I first met the PRI team, and I realized that I wanted to work with them because they already have the habit of logging all their data minute by minute. But Dan told me on one of our first investigations, well, we probably ought to take a break as we're getting toward midnight, because nothing ever happens around midnight to 1 o'clock. And to me, I've always been alive to the data from folklore, which always insists that midnight is one of the most important times for paranormal events to happen. And not midnight according to the clock, but true midnight.
According to the movies.
Like between sunset and the next morning sunrise. But at any rate, we, for better or worse, we were just using midnight as by the clock. And I said, no, Dan, I want to keep our investigators, on track and not give them a break at that time, because I think that is when we might have something. And he said, okay, we'll do that. And the very first time we were investigating together, I think that was at the Beatty Mansion, where they heard the loud scream of a woman screaming, and then like a follow-up sound of a woman like sobbing, like she was in pain or grief or something like that. And everybody heard it. I mean, it was acoustically there. I didn't hear it because I was downstairs at the base camp, but everybody in the upstairs rooms heard it. And it was recorded on multiple instruments that we had going. So it was definitely an acoustic thing that happened within the house. And it happened right at midnight. So, as soon as they called it in, I keyed my radio and said, oh, and by the way, Dan, it's 12:03. and by God, the very next time it happened, the very next investigation we were on, I know it was Garnett House or whatever, and the same thing happened, and Dan happened to be sitting by me at the command post when somebody called in an anomalous event that they've experienced. I don't know whether it's shadow moving across the wall or whatever. And just to be an asshole, even though I was sitting right behind him, I keyed my microphone and said, this information is for Dan. I want you to know that it's 12:04 p.m.
That's awesome.
And that's a good point that you brought up, and I just wanted to iterate it again to all the people listening and the investigators out there that true midnight and true happenings is more characteristic of how you should interpret things as opposed to the time, because when you think about time itself is a man-made construct
Absolutely.
that
Absolutely.
has been
And
altered.
then, we record barometric pressure, we record things like electromagnetic spikes, or anything Dan has always called this evidence stacking, and I think that's great.
Yeah.
Because the more correspondences you can come up with, I mean, I'm to the point where I think that just with the RNG alone, the correspondences are so strong. And sometimes, I fail to mention this, but sometimes the RNG event occurs just before the person reports an anomalous event. Sometimes it occurs just after a person has recorded an anomalous event. But the thing is, I think if it happens before, we might be able to use the RNG as a predictive tool to say, hey, we just had an RNG event, so heads up, everybody. There might be a paranormal event about to occur.
And yeah, that's a very good point, and I'd like to throw out there that it may, if you do a certain thing, it may even be indicative of a residual type haunting causing the random number generator. So in regards to that scream that everybody heard, was it 12:03 p.m. at the Beatty Mansion? Has anybody done investigative research to find out if anything in history has happened with a very bad connotation in that time, in that place, at that given time? Like, did someone die in the mansion on a certain day at that time?
Yeah, I think that's another very good question. We have two people on our team, Lisa and Peggy, who are really good amateur historians, and they typically get information about the location that we're doing experiments in, so they can try to pin down stuff like that. However, very seldom does it come down to, the very minute something happened.
Yeah, that's hard to do.
But yeah, I think it's important to know if there was, like a suicide in that building or some other tragedy happened in that building, because oftentimes those are the buildings that are most noted as having paranormal events.
Yeah. What are you gonna
I have a question, and excuse me if you've already answered this. The alcohol is kicking in on me some. So, can a person's personality or make the RNG go off? Can it measure that if it's not paranormal, but it's actually that person, how they're reacting to the atmosphere?
So do you
What
do you think influences the RNG?
Yeah.
So
Can a person influence that?
Let me go a little bit further. So everybody has brainwave output frequencies.
Uh-huh.
Are you saying that a person's innate brain waves that they're triggering and emitting at a certain time influence the radiation levels to cause the random number generator?
Absolutely. How you react and how I react. I'm pretty chill.
Right.
So,
and that's a very good question, and the very quickest answer is to say I don't know, but I want to come back to this because we don't know. Again, we don't have a general theory of connection between what happens, why there is a correlation between the RNG and a paranormal event. It could be that the event itself causes, quote, and I'm using finger quotes, the paranormal event itself causes the RNG to react. But it also could be that the person who's having a paranormal experience, they see a shadow move across the wall, or suddenly an object in front of them moves, or they see something in the mirror, that their emotions are so strong at that time, they're, that they may give off some kind of mental pulse that actually affects the RNG. I don't know. I just don't know at this point. It even may be that the researcher himself, and I'm talking about me in this case, I want there to be a correspondence between somebody calling in an anomalous event and the RNG to go off. So maybe when somebody calls an event, and in an event, I hear them calling in an event, and maybe I get so excited, and I'm sitting right next to the RNG, maybe I get so excited that I affect it. I don't know. There's 100 different possibilities.
Okay, well, the reason I asked because we talked briefly about 9/11 and how some of the numbers went off this. So it just made me think about that. I'm no way downplaying this. I just wondered if that had, emotion or whatever, we could set that off.
Because I was saying the same thing, is do you think do you have a theory of what's infecting it? Because if 9/11 can affect it that way, that, large groups of people thinking about the same event, syncing up, does it affect the environment?
You're asking me for a general theory, and like I said, we really don't have very much evidence, but I will go ahead and go out on a limb and do some speculation. I think that we may be dealing with something that I call that. Now, this is a metaphor. I know any hard-nosed scientist would laugh at me for this, but I think we might be dealing with something that I call a probability field, and that within the location of the haunted house, probability itself changes when a paranormal event occurs, and that causes the RNG to go off the beam. Now, I know that probability is actually, it's not a field, it's actually the characteristic of a particular event. The probability that a particular event will happen. I understand that. But to my mind, there was a famous parapsychologist named William Roll who he wrote like the definitive book on poltergeist work. And he talked about what he called a psi field in a haunted house. Now, I don't know if my probability field is the same as his psi field or not, but I think it could be the same sort of thing in play. And what we're talking about then is a technical device that measures a disturbance in the force, if you will.
Yeah, causation, yeah. So I just wanted to throw this out there. It brings me back to a type of paranormal entity, and I know they've done research in laboratories to try to prove this existence. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of something called a tulpa.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where you get enough people to start thinking something is real,
And it manifests.
that God, what am I trying to say? The emotions and the belief that
Causes that.
causes it to manifest.
Yeah, but like Thin Man and
Yeah.
stuff like that, yeah.
Well, and there's some theories on poltergeists are the same thing,
Yes.
that they're generated by a person in the area.
I just wanted to throw that out there, that there might be correlation
Oh, yeah.
with that type of thing.
And two things come to mind. If you want to know more about Tulpa, you should watch the movie The Shadow. Great fantasy film with Alec Baldwin. I'm a huge film fan, so.
Interesting.
You're in good company.
I know
Yeah.
I know they made a recent movie with the kid that played Draco Malfoy in the Harry Potter series.
Right.
In Universal, I think it was called The Entity, but The Entity that I know of is the old one where the lady gets molested
The
by a
rape,
demon.
scene, yes.
Oh, right. Which
But-
is based on a real case, by the way.
It
Yeah. But this, it's a fantastic movie, horrifying.
Yeah.
This. Sorry, I'm tapping on the table. They're telling me not to tap. the movie is based on them trying to create a paranormal entity in a controlled environment by thinking about it. And
Well,
they actually
there's a
succeed.
book by a Canadian parapsychologist. Actually, the book was written by his wife, Iris Owen. But there's a book called Conjuring Up Philip.
Yeah.
And it was an extended experiment by a parapsychologist, A.R.G. Owen, in Canada, with a group of graduate students who decided to try to see if they could mentally create a ghost.
Yeah, they made a movie about it, I think. It was pretty good.
Oh, cool. Well, I would love to hear about it.
I'd love to see it.
I don't
I
know
can't
the
remember
name
the
of
name of
it. If you can find it and give it to me, I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah.
But it's a real true thing that actually happened. And there were like scientific reports in some of the Canadian parapsychology journals and so forth that talked about all of the events that Philip did once they created him. I mean, he was like moving objects and talking to them through the Ouija board.
That's crazy.
And oddly enough, they would sometimes like think of that there was like one historical event going on, and Philip would say, "Oh no, that didn't happen until 20 years ago." And it turned out when they checked, he was right.
Yeah, and it scared some of his research assistants away because they did it in a house.
Did.
When was this done?
Yeah, absolutely it did. And Philip was furious whenever anybody tried to tell him that they had made him up.
Yeah.
And he sometimes followed. They would have seances, and they would sometimes follow some of the sitters home and wreak havoc in their homes, especially if they didn't believe in him.
Yeah.
Was there any kind of documentation on this and filming and recording or anything like
And
that?
I think that book has been long out of print unless it's been brought back in.
Yeah.
Pretty
I
Amazon.
don't know if they did video documentation of it, but the whole experiment was documented.
I would love to
Yeah,
do that.
yeah,
It happened, I want to say, in the 60s or 70s.
I believe that's right.
I can't remember
Okay.
what exact date.
Well, that's excellent. Thank you.
The movie that I remember watching about it was very fascinating. He was devout into this experiment, and it really destroyed the psyche of some of these research assistants that he was working with. They were scarred for life. Like,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
so.
Well, yeah, would you though? I mean, that would really mess with you, right?
Yeah. Because especially back in that time,
Yeah.
it was a big thing to research and
Well, and
stuff.
I always
the
thought it
psycho-
should have been a bigger thing.
yeah,
Because, I mean, some people knew about it, and I guess if there's a movie, more people know about it today. But at the time, it barely made a dent in most people's. Even academic parapsychologists didn't pay it much attention.
yeah, because people were
And
afraid to talk
I
about
thought
it.
it should have got a lot more attention than it did. You know, this is off the subject, but we were talking about evidence stacking a little bit earlier, and back when I was in college, and this was back in the early 70s, I'm going to date myself here, but one of the most persistent things in folklore is that psychic events tend to happen around the time of the full moon each year, or each month. And I thought that if this was true, then surely that like people who are conducting psi experiments in laboratories like ESP card tests and stuff would have had higher scores during the time of the full moon each month. So I, being a naive college student, I wrote to J.B. Ryan, who was considered the father of parapsychology in the United States, and to ask the question is because it would be easy to do to take, because all of those ESP tests are dated, and you just take a handful of them in one hand and a handful of almanacs in your other hand and see when the full moon is, and see if the test scores are higher during the time of the full moon. Easy to do, right?
Yeah.
And I wrote to him, and I didn't get an answer, and I did not get an answer, and I didn't get an answer, until finally I got an answer from his wife, who herself is a very highly respected parapsychologist. Her name is Louisa Ryan, and she wrote to me one of the most extraordinary letters I've ever received. She said, "We are aware of the possibility of this correlation, but we haven't analyzed it any further, because if it turned out to be true, it would be giving credence to astrology, and we don't want to do that.
Wow. That's interesting, but in my opinion, that's very closed-minded.
No, it's
Well, you have to understand the
Exactly.
position of parapsychology at that time. It was being laughed at by every hard-nosed scientist and
Yep.
physicist there was.
That makes sense.
And they were in a fight to gain any kind of respectability. And so I understand. I understand. I grok where they were coming from. But still, it was like, oh my God.
Yeah, no, yeah.
you
I
got to
totally-
crawl before you walk.
True.
And they were trying to gain enough precedence. I mean, like we've talked about on this podcast, like 30 years ago, talking about Bigfoot would be, I mean, literally ruin your career. Or
Defamatory,
even paranormal. And luckily, over the past 30 years, more and more, because of TV shows, whether they be good or not, has moved it into plausible, not necessarily, possible, but plausible, and people don't turn their nose up to it as much.
Well, look
So-
at it. It's in commercials. It's
Yeah.
It's in shows. They're making movies. They're making commercials about it. It's accepted now, right? I mean, more than it's ever has been. Hey, I have a quick question. Do you still have that letter? That's fascinating.
I do not, unfortunately. That
Wow.
was many years. That was when I was in, like I said, college back in the 1970s.
Sure.
That was over 50 years ago. Paper doesn't last.
Would-
And I didn't realize the importance of it at the time.
But I think
Sure,
that's
yeah.
gosh, that'd been so neat just to have that, in
In
a frame or
yeah,
something like
and
that.
shit, yeah.
How amazing is that?
I know, right?
So,
But yeah, you're right. I think people have gotten much more open to parapsychology. The thing is, right now, I started to say this a little bit earlier. Like I said, when I wrote my paper about our results, one of the things I wanted to do was bridge the separation between amateur paranormal investigations on the one hand and scientific investigations on the other.
Love it.
And I think a lot of that can be done today if we just get the amateur groups to be more interested in the scientific study of this. And what they don't realize, and I keep seeing them try to reinvent the wheel, because what they don't realize is that academic parapsychology has existed for 140 years now, I guess, or so. I can't do the math in my head, but ever since the founding of the Society for Psychical Research in London back in 1882. And I mean, that's when the first scientific journals in this field started. And we have had, typically 5 or 6 peer-reviewed scientific parapsychology. Back in that day it was called psychical research, but then it became parapsychology journals in English published ever since then. And most of today's paranormal investigators don't know about it. And what a crying shame that is, because all of those experiments are sitting in the journals and in the proceedings of the Society of the Psychical Research in London, the American Society of Psychical Research, the Parapsychological Association, and all of these groups that publish papers. They still have annual conferences and publish scientific papers. Now, granted, some of it's a little hard to understand because a lot of it is based on probability theory. And if you know anything about statistics, you know that probability statistics is probably the most counterintuitive of all kinds of statistics. But if you can master that and read what's been accomplished in the field so far, you will be amazed at how much we already know about ghosts and poltergeists and things like that.
But I'd like to add in, like we kind of briefly talked about, but your experiment with the random number generator and events, I had heard about being brought up. My background is electronic technologies, military, and industrial electronics. So I have some skepticism on electronic devices because I know they can be influenced. But when the way you're talking about it and the number generator and where you're pulling the randomness to me leads credence to that, because that is truly very hard to influence. Like, I mean, I can make sounds come across radios. I can do a whole bunch of stuff.
You can't change radiation.
Yeah, no, and you know, you're right. There's still a lot. I have the same questions of the theory of how's that getting influenced. Is that brainwave? Is that environment or not? But the scientific approach that you're talking about is it's not hard to replicate. It's just trying to get people to understand why they need to do the test and that procedure.
Right.
And then Larry took it like 9 levels higher of trying to then interpret the number pattern to the event to see if there's causation or correlation that a shadow person causes five numbers in a row versus some others, which you don't. There's no way you have enough data points to be able to even capture that even yet. So I
sorry
understand
about that.
Yeah, no, it's.
You said we have to walk or crawl before we
Yeah,
walk. My bad.
we're barely crawling. But no, I mean, like I said, you'd mentioned the other, you know, where they did the number generator and then they did a placebo. I hadn't heard about that one. Yours picked up because of it, and maybe it's because I heard the other, and it didn't go. Oh, that makes sense. Yours made sense because you're trying to time track when the event happens.
Right, and that's why my program always returns to, you know, we basically reset after every 100, you know, quote, coin tosses, unquote. We reset to the baseline and start all over again and do another 100 coin tosses. That's why we can analyze the time segments incrementally in a much finer degree than anybody's ever tried to do before.
So the 100 coin tosses with the binary input, roughly how many, is that microseconds, milliseconds, nanoseconds?
Well, yeah, I can't remember how many ones and zeros is generated per minute, but it's a lot.
Yeah. No, I mean, I didn't know if you had that number. I was just curious.
One of the things that we record, it's automatically recorded, is every time we do have an anomalous amount of heads or tails, or ones or zeros, it tells us how many, you know, first of all, it tells us how many, what the threshold is, how many we've had. But it also tells us whether, you know, we've had more ones or more zeros. And I've always wondered if that in itself was an indication of something that's happening. Like maybe we have more zeros when somebody's having a more negative experience. They're frightened or confused or something like that. And more ones when somebody has, you know, a more positive experience. That's just one possible thing we need to look at. But there's so many.
Yeah, no, I mean, that would be, I mean, you need a ton of data for that. That is neat to be even thinking about that level.
Right.
So I just wanted to throw out.
And one of the things people have asked is, you know, does any other of your instruments, like your radios, for example, does it influence the RNG? And the answer, we've done control tests on it over and over, and, you know, put the RNG right next to one of our walkie-talkies. Now that walkie-talkie, I guarantee you, will cause a spike in any EMF meter, but it does nothing. It has no effect whatsoever on an RNG.
That's awesome.
So I just wanted to throw this out there to close things out, if you guys don't mind.
Well, let me throw something out.
Okay.
Just on the random number generator I'm a geek. A lot of geeks listen to us. Your random number generator is not a standard generator because of the fact that you're monitoring off of the area noise. Because you talked about like a programmed random number generator will eventually repeat. I mean, because you're programming.
That's called pseudo-random number generator.
And what a lot of people that deal with electronic dice for D&D, they've ran into that situation. And what they've now moved towards is actually physics engines to actually use physics off the dice to give them the random generation of it in a real world. Because you figured out what you needed to do to get the randomness, the true randomness, because that's...
It had to be true random.
So what I was trying to get is the amount of effort you put into this to make sure
Yeah.
you're not getting influenced is a lot more work than what people realize, and it takes an amazing brain to even think about that. To go, hey, and
I agree.
thank you. I appreciate this.
I appreciate that. And I'll tell you, this is funny, but the way I first realized this and started it was when home computers were brand new. I got myself a Commodore VIC-20, and then eventually a Commodore 64.
Oh yeah.
And
that's the
and
most
it had a sound diode in it that created white noise for games, because those computers were game computers.
Mhm.
And so every time your spaceship blew up, it went. But that was a sound diode that created purely random numbers. And you could actually peek into the memory location of where that sound diode was, and you would get a totally random result. So way back in like the early 1980s, I was doing like ESP card guessing games, that I had programmed on my computer based on the sound diode randomness, not based on the a call to a random process within the programming language.
Interesting.
So,
Yeah.
sorry, you just sparked a thought of my brain on
Oh
this.
God.
It's brainy.
Yeah, well, no, because of the way your random generating is looking at the environment based on frequency background, it could lead credence to more than just supernatural. Like you're saying, card guessing. Does the person influence the environment when they know what card is getting ready to come up?
Oh shit.
Right. Well, the first person to really nail the random number generator was this guy, because originally J.B. Ryan got criticized for his ESP card testing because a lot of people thought his targets were not randomized enough. They had to be truly random. And the guy who answered the call was a physicist working for Boeing named Helmut Schmidt, and he came up with a random number generator based on the decay of strontium-90, which, like I mentioned earlier, was one of the most truly random processes we know about the universe, because every time a subatomic particle was emitted, it would stop the binary counter in either the 1 or the 0 position. And then, based on that, a little light would move either clockwise or counterclockwise on this big dial of lights. And so they could do precognition experiments where the subjects were trying to guess which way the light would move, or they could do PK, or psychokinesis experiments, where they tried to influence which way the light would move.
Wow.
But they could use the same random process for both kinds of experiments.
That's crazy.
That's amazing.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's
That's
multiple
absolutely amazing.
episodes right there just
Yeah.
talking to you about that.
So, my question to close this all out was, these guys laugh at me for this, but Jason. Jason and I like to do this thing because I'm really big into aliens and UFOs.
Stargazing.
We go out to a random location. It's usually a cemetery out in the middle of nowhere, far enough away that the light pollution level is low enough that we can see more of the night sky. And we sit there and we watch for anomalous things in the sky. We use, satellite trackers. What are the transponder tracker things?
Transponder tracker.
I don't know avionics very well.
No transponders. No, don't.
To see if we see something out of the ordinary, we can pinpoint, that was a plane, that was a satellite, that was something we can't explain. And I've experienced stuff doing that in the night sky that I just flat out, I don't know what the hell happened or I saw. It would be interesting to do that with the random number generator experiment that you have at the same time, to see if any correlations between stuff in the night sky that we're seeing.
I would love to do that.
That'd also help out to determine whether or not you have any time loss.
Shit, yeah. And it would give credence to what we're seeing.
I think that's great. That's awesome. I would love to do it.
Yeah, we need to set that up because that. I'm not gonna lie, that just gave me a boner. Trying to think of that,
Well,
like that fascinates.
That's what you
Well,
Well, I mean, I think what Larry's trying to say is what you've started lends applicability to a bunch of different realms.
Bigfoot.
Yeah, Bigfoot. Whether it's paranormal or physical, is it UFOs? Is it environmental cause? It's hard scientific data that can at least be tracked at the same time to see if there's any causation or correlation.
Yeah.
To give you some credence of okay, you know what, we're seeing this. When the flash in the sky happens, we get standard numbers.
And this goes back to my idea of a probability field. It's like, it's really improbable every time the RNG has an anomalous output. That's it. The probability against it that is phenomenally high. But it's just as improbable that at that same moment something anomalous happens, either in a haunted house or out under an open sky where something anomalous happens. You're still dealing with probability and the fact that, I'm sounding like Douglas Adams, because it's like probability
42.
is falling.
That's
It's
the
now
answer.
1-to-1. You have attained normal probability again.
Was it the Hitchhiker's Guide?
Yes,
yeah.
It's the
Great.
it's the same concept because
What?
you're basically measuring probability, whether it's in the RNG or whether it's in the environment around you.
Yeah, and I'm interested not just like if we see something anomalous in the sky, but the last time we went out a couple of weeks ago, I witnessed, all of us actually witnessed it, but it was the first time I've ever experienced that, and it was jaw dropping. Like, opened my mind up that I saw a huge. It struck across the entire sky. A meteor, a giant meteor, come into our atmosphere, and it lit up on fire, split into several segments that were on fire, and then just disappeared. I had never seen anything like that before in my life, but who's to say that wouldn't influence a random number generation?
If you're picking up the
that would be
standard
interesting.
radiation in the area, it could, because it's literally a
Especially,
meteorite.
especially if there were other people that were looking up in the night sky that at the same moment seeing that same improbable event happening.
Yeah.
With all of their, emotions, all of their cognitive processes all suddenly converge on that one thing, like the Global Consciousness Project, and that affect a random number generator.
Yeah, it was awe-inspiring, I have to admit.
I mean, to me, though, as you talk about it, the precog would be, to me, more interesting, because now you're getting into the credence of Mothman. The phenomena of seeing something that predates a major disaster, like 2 to 3 days before.
Oh, wow.
If you could pick that up,
Yeah.
because either brainwave activity or the environment, as you said, can you determine, hey, I got this pattern, something should happen. I'm not saying,
That's
a
fantastic.
few seconds ahead. I mean, to be able to do that, you need tons of data. You need to be in the right place at the right time, or a big enough team across the world to pick that up, like 9/11. If it was happening 2 hours before, like you're saying, was that pre-planning of it, or was it people just naturally picking that up?
So I just wanted to. I know I always say one more fact or one more question or something. I'm bad about that.
You're going to have to do a lot of editing on this.
Yeah. So one of the people that we ended up having go out with us during sky watching recently is legally blind. He has macular degeneration. So he can see
Still funny.
peripherally perfectly, but straight on he can't see unless it's like 2 inches from his eyes. It would be interesting to me. Stupid light, man. This place is possessed. You need that fixed.
We got flickering lights just to,
It's Larry's attachment. But go on, Larry.
No, so it
it's
would
under
be,
you.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 shut up. It would be interesting to me if this was to be able to be performed in a so-called haunted location. You have a team of investigators all in one room, but they have different sense deprivations. So like one person would be blind, one person would be deaf, one person would be mute, maybe one person is all of them and then one person is normal, to see if a correlation occurred with the random number generator for an experience that someone had. So say someone called in and said, I saw a shadow, or the 3 people that out of the 4 that can see called in and say they saw a shadow. If
Are you saying they're all in the same room so they can all experience the same thing at the same time to see
yeah,
if they
but
register?
one person didn't experience it, would that cause a different effect of the random number generator based on if it was just one normal person in the room?
Mhm.
My mind's going a million ways, and I don't. That
And
probably
you
didn't make any
mentioned
sense.
you actually have this. You actually have a random number generator app that you developed to be able to do this?
Say again, I'm sorry.
So do you have an app on your you have an app on your phone to be able to generate this? Is this something that people could download or get off
Yeah,
of it?
the app on my phone is a custom computer program that I wrote myself, and I'm happy to share it with anybody. In fact, one of the things that, originally I was kind of separate from the PRI, but once I realized what they were about, I joined them. So I am now a member of the PRI.
Nice.
And one of the things that we all agree on is that we have to have absolute transparency of
I agree.
data, which means that anybody is welcome to go over all of our research material. They can look at our spreadsheets. They can look at the original photographs of Brandy's, actually handwritten
Logs.
logs, investigation logs, so that they can know that we are not making any of this stuff up. It's all there for anybody to look at.
Yeah,
The computer program is the same. It will run on pretty much any smartphone, as long as that smartphone has an RF chipset that actually picks up atmospheric noise. As long as it can do that, then this program will look into the memory location of the computer that is the smartphone. Smartphones are computers, and retrieve the random numbers.
Yeah, we need to get you as well as the entire PRI team on here to talk about some of this stuff more, because this is a rabbit hole we can go down for
Oh, yeah.
decades, in my opinion.
Well, and we've talked about trying to do a tech segment or a tech episode of equipment and theories and stuff like that, not just stories. So if we're all in the area, maybe we could figure out some place to set up.
Very,
and do
very
something.
sadly, I've got to say that it's kind of sad, but most people, and we've just got to face this, most people aren't interested in the scientific part of this. They are bored to death by statistics. I get that. And they're really into it just for the thrills and chills.
Yeah, they want the sexy part of it, which some guys that were heavy eyeshadow are doing.
That's not what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I feel like if those people were to ever actually listen to us, hint hint, and actually look at the data, their minds would be changed, because they would realize, hey, this is interesting. Something is going on here. Stop tapping. That deserves a wider look, and I don't know where I'm going.
Well, I guess my one question, I'm kind of the simpleton of the group here, public school, so I didn't go to school very often.
In Missouri.
Yeah, in Missouri for sure. So my question, nothing against UMKC, wonderful school. So saying that, maybe I missed out, but can you tell us what got you into the paranormal field? What was the thing that turned you like, hey, this is my thing, this is what I'm interested in doing? How did that, was that organic? Did something happen in your life where it got you researching or looking into it?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. I've always been interested in paranormal phenomena, and hauntings in particular. Apparitions, poltergeists, anything of that nature has always, ever since I was a little kid. And I grew up I was just essentially, I was raised by my grandmother who grew up in the Ozarks, and she had all of these stories about hauntings and poltergeists and stuff that were part of her family history. And so I grew up listening to these stories just as part of normal dinner table talk. And she never questioned any of this stuff because she'd experienced a lot of it. But when I would go to school, even grade school, and tell my little, schoolmates about it, they would all go, "Oh, there's no such things as ghosts. That doesn't exist." And I took that as a challenge. I thought, well, if this stuff is real, then there ought to be scientific, not necessarily proof, but there ought to be scientific evidence that supports that something is going on in terms of hauntings. And so I started researching parapsychology or psychical research from the time I was in high school.
Wow.
I've had, in fact, again, this dates me, back in 1966, when I was just graduating from 8th grade, I wrote a letter to Fate magazine asking about what would be good technical instrumentation to use in the investigation of a haunted house. This was in '66. And I got an answer from one of the country's leading parapsychologists, Ian Stevenson, who's still probably the greatest ever on cases of reincarnation. And he said there had just been an article published in the Journal of the American Society for Psychical Research, JASPER, we call it, and it was written by Charles Tart, all about the technical devices that could be used for measuring things in investigating a haunting. So in the 8th grade, I joined the American Society of Psychical Research just so I could read their journals. And sure enough, I read the article by Charles Tart, which talked about all kinds of stuff. He talked about equipping a small minivan with all kinds of stuff. I mean, stuff since then we've seen in countless movies. But this was in '66. Nobody thought about it yet. And he talked about strain gauges and electromagnetic field recordings and analyzing the differing light changes within a sealed room, filtered to the different parts of the light spectrum, all kinds of things that I'd never thought of doing before. And I was off and running at that point.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. And I hate to be greedy, but I'm going to ask one more question if you don't mind. And
Not at all.
And I do appreciate your time. I truly mean that. You brought up reincarnation.
Oh, God.
And that has been a terrifying thought for me since some movie I saw back when I was like 9 years old, but I was so in that business.
Was it a home video?
No. But I am so enthralled with it. I'm even thinking about taking, going through some kind of hypno-transgression, past life transgression, just just to experience it. What are your thoughts on that? What have you concluded, if I may ask?
Based on the work of Dr. Ian Stevenson and the others who have followed, I think there's really strong evidence, really evidential material that supports reincarnation.
I love it.
A lot of times it has to do with young children who remember former lives, and
Yes.
they're way too young to remember that
Yes.
they have memories of like being shot down in a plane during World War II, and they remember the aircraft carrier the plane took off on, and the children are actually brought to meet some of the surviving members of that were on board that same aircraft carrier, and they remember. I mean, they share memories. He knows them. If you wanted, they're actually out on, there used to be at least, there was a YouTube video about research in afterlife, and parapsychology is referred to as survival research. And you can go at this in a number of different ways. Survival research would include anything from apparitions to mediumistic data to cases of reincarnation to near-death experiences to deathbed observations by doctors and nurses. I mean, there's a ton of data out there on survival research. But on YouTube, there is a program that was hosted by, of all people, John Cleese, who is a member of Monty Python,
Yes.
who has a deep and abiding interest in parapsychology.
So-
And he's the moderator of this panel, and they bring to the table all of the latest research on survival research. And if you haven't seen it, I recommend you.
Well, I appreciate it so much.
So my brain just exploded. I apologize. So we'll finish this as the last little quip. So you're talking about reincarnation and people remembering past lives. Is
Right.
it possible that our consciousness, reincarnation is real, but our consciousness is recycled into the same cycle? So when you die, your consciousness starts over the same exact life, and that could be an explanation of why people have deja vu. Because their consciousness has experienced this exact moment before.
So you're saying on like a time loop, you're repeating the same time
Yeah,
versus
when
a
you-
different life.
Like a residual.
No,
from a different
no.
life?
Not a different life. Your exact same
No,
life.
that's what I'm saying.
over
You're doing a
again.
loop versus the other theory
Interesting.
is you're going into a new life and doing experiences that way.
Not just that, but like say Dave dies,
And he has to live his life all over again, except he has to make the right decisions.
but he doesn't know about it.
Yeah, but that's why he gets deja vu.
That's why he gets deja vu.
I think deja vu has a lot of possible explanations.
Yeah.
That's one. But another was, of course, would be precognition, precognitive dreams, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, thank you. That was my next question. So if someone has a reoccurring dream, which I've had my whole life, and
What was her name?
and I wish it was that way. And I'll just share over on the podcast and get your guys' thoughts real quick. It's me. I know it's me.
I know it's you too.
I'm in the middle of the jungle of forest, and
Was Arnold there?
Arnold was not there. I was close as you can get to it, which is not saying much. So anyway, I do remember that we were under attack and we were being overwhelmed. And I remember me and my guys, I'm running. We're running away. We're trying to escape.
To get to the chopper.
Yeah, no, we're just trying to run away to keep from getting killed. And I remember seeing a hole in the ground. It's the same dream every time. And I jump in the hole hoping they would run past me.
And they don't.
And they don't. And I look up, there they are with their guns, and I'm shot to death.
When were you born? What
Wow.
year?
Yeah.
What year?
66.
So do you think that's Korean or Vietnam? Because Vietnam ended in '73, but a lot of activity was in early.
I can't tell you. I don't know what, if anything. I don't know, but
Yeah.
it's been a recurring dream my whole life, though.
I'm just gonna elaborate on this. What kind of gun was it? Was it?
You know, do you remember the GI Joe longer guns with the banana clip that goes in like
Yeah,
that?
it's AK-47.
Yeah, that's what I had.
Okay, so relatively current.
Which was built
Style.
back in '57. But to sum this all up real quick, I would like to ask, we're doing a phone interview with you. Would you rather do the phone interview? Did this go well, or do you think it could have been different if we'd done it in person somewhere else? Or because you're fascinating, I think could be like probably 5 to 10 episodes
easy.
Oh God.
of what you brought up is just amazing. It's been wonderful talking with you. But I'd like your feedback of what you.
Well, I gotta say, I'm an ex-DJ. I'm really comfortable in front of a microphone.
Okay, awesome.
Or a phone, I'm just really comfortable with doing audio, so I don't think it would have been any different no matter how we approached this. And I'm just as comfortable dealing, doing stuff with people in real life. I tend to get along with just about anybody. And I can usually explain my concepts and even this abstract stuff about, probability statistics and all that kind of stuff, to the point where even normal people kind of get it.
Dave,
Yeah,
I think Dave.
I really appreciate you guys throwing me in that middle of that. I'll make sure I punch both of you when we're done.
Yeah, no, I think it was phenomenal talking with you. Yeah, totally natural. Almost like you were just sitting here talking with us. That's what I just.
Oh,
It was-
yeah. I feel the same way about you guys. I feel like I know you all now, and I've been having shots with you, and
Yeah.
I think
We
that's just
love
awesome.
it. We love it.
So thank you for coming on. This isn't going to be the last time we have you on. Trust me.
That's up to you.
Yeah. Your decision. Maybe after you see the video.
I will show up anytime you invite me.
Because this has opened up all sorts of avenues. I can't wait to set up a sky watching with the random number generator.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Or hear your theories, like if we could get multiple paranormal groups using the same scientific method in multiple sites at one time, or same locations at the same time. I'd love to hear your theories on like what would be like a perfect scenario for you if you could gather data.
Yeah.
Get that written down and then talk about it. Because we know, I don't know a lot of people. Larry knows a lot of people, and there's possibilities that maybe we can make some things happen to check off certain boxes of the scientific world for you, because that's what I'm here for. Is like I'd rather have scientific proof of certain things to make people. I think a lot of people have these experiences and they don't want to talk about it necessarily because it's not mainstream. We're getting close, but if we make people feel at ease to be able to come out and say, you know what, that door totally closed on me when I was asleep, or
we have to move this stuff from the realm of the subjective, which subjective accounts just don't a lot of times don't carry a lot of weight with other people, and I've heard so many people describe their psychic experiences to me that I'm kind of almost okay, yeah, that's nice.
But did you film it?
Yes. Sorry about that.
No. I'm not saying anyone of you, but it's always interesting.
Yeah, and we can always do this. Well, if you do come here, we could run since Larry has an attachment that brings it to my house that we see odd stuff.
I do not.
Yeah, we have it on film. So there's odd stuff that does happen when Larry comes over when we do our podcast. We see stuff floating by the couch.
Actually, that would be kind of neat just to see.
And run
we ain't doing it in my apartment.
No, but we'll do it here.
I'm just saying, just as we talk, to see the random number generator based off a topic would be an interesting subject.
I think that's
true.
what
No.
Because if we mark
That's
down
if you're
topics, if you're willing, yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So
I'm so excited.
Yeah. So again, thank you for coming on.
My pleasure, and it was my honor to be here, and I want to thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, this has been absolutely phenomenal.
Absolutely.
So thank you guys for watching. I know this was a little bit longer of an episode, but it's well worth it.
Absolutely.
Trust me. If you got to this point, thank you.
I was going to say, tell them at the end doesn't really work. You're going to have to cut that to
scared everybody away.
No, I think you did an excellent job explaining things at a level that everybody can understand, which is very hard for, the technical difficulties that you're dealing with. Thank you.
So, until next time, keep on drinking, people.
Keep
Be
chumming.
safe.